All right, so our next step now is going to be to add the big columns that stretch, or the big beams, I'm sorry, that stretch across the top of the columns and extend beyond to pick up the roof line. So the structure has been a little hard to diagnose, but I think we're getting a little bit closer. So what I'm going to do is come in and we're going to zoom into the drawing and we're going to create another beam. The same way we did our column, we'll create our shape. You notice this one doesn't line up just perfect on the AutoCAD drawings. Since we didn't do the AutoCAD drawings, we don't know for sure, but what we're doing is doing the best we can. So I'm going to create a component, and we're going to call it beams. And again, I might have skipped this in the previous video, but you always want to make sure that this replace selection with component is clicked. If it's not selected, then you will be creating a component and you'll be left with just the line work, which is not that helpful. So I'm going to create my component, open it up, and again I want to make sure that I clean out some of those little lines so that it'll behave as a single entity. And let's see what we have there. Yep, and sure enough, it's going to push right out. So we are going to take that beam and we're going to try and grab it there and push it, or pull it I guess in this case, all the way across to where it ends on the front of the building. So with that, I'm trying not to zoom in too much, but you may need to zoom in to be able to grab it. As we float across, we can click it to the outside edge. Once we're there, we can start making some copies of this thing and we can move it to the other edge of the building. I'm going to go ahead and use the base of my column as a reference point, and it should, if we did it right, line up my column with the other side. Now there are a couple interesting things. We know we've got a couple columns on the back of the building as well, or beams, excuse me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a copy of my beam. I'm going to move it over here, and then I'm going to just go ahead and rotate it. And the rotation reference we can be a little bit loose on. I'm going to go ahead and select from one side and just rotate it around a base point. So we're using an angle, a base angle, and then moving it 90 degrees. This particular beam, we know from our drawing, actually sits and interferes with the other beam. Not interferes, it intersects. So we're going to move over here and we can take a look at that. I'm going to go ahead and just move this beam over just a hair, and I'll move it 2 feet just so we can see. And here you can see that we have a beam running one direction and this beam running in the other direction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead for the sake of the model and I'm going to let those two interfere. So I'm going to just undo what I did and I'm going to move this beam over so that the back corner intersects with the back corner of the beam. And you can tell that my angle is tricky. It won't let me get close to that beam. So I shifted my angle a little bit so I could get to it. And it's got a lot of line work in there. We want to make sure they're lined up just right. So be careful, because those beams were drawn at kind of funny angles, they're acting a little bit funny as well. And you can see that because of the line work that my beams are now intersecting. The next thing we want to do is, after doing some diagnosis on the structure, it's doing a couple different things. We are going to have another beam, and in this case, this beam is going to stop over on the other side here. So I am going to make this beam unique, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I'm going to go ahead and create a copy of it, and I'm going to move it right over here and just get it close to where it goes. In looking at the images online, this ceiling structure runs straight through here and straight through here and does a little bit of a jog right here. So we're going to have an opportunity to make some unique items. So I'm going to move my beam over and just go ahead and connect it right to the outside edge of my exterior beam. In reality, I'll show you some details, but this flange would extend into the other flange and would be custom cut. So the next piece that we're going to do here is, obviously, my beams aren't exactly the same size. So I'm going to make a couple unique ones. Now this is one place where I made a component. If I make a change to this beam, it will change both of these beams, and that we don't want. So I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to make this one unique. And that will allow me to open it up, and now I can stretch it to the outside edge where it appears to go from the drawing, and it didn't make my other beams longer. It should have kept those exactly where they are, and they are still intact. Now, this beam, we're going to have to do the same thing. We're going to want to make it unique because it's actually shorter than this one and the other two. And once we've made it unique, we can open it up and we can push it back. And notice I'm hovering over next to the end of the existing beam. It'll allow it to snap right into that existing beam. And that gives me my beam structure. I do know I've got a couple closure pieces in there, which I think we'll add in shortly. Actually, let's do it right now. We know that at the end of the beams, it does close itself off. So I'm going to make another copy of this beam, and I'm going to move it. I'm actually going to use a reference point below the column, and I'm going to just move it over here. And again, we will make that one unique. We can open it up and push it right back so that it fits. Sometimes you do need to zoom in to get a good grip on it. Be careful. If you notice, I just pushed the interior of the flange because I didn't get a good view on it. So you want to make sure that you're pushing the piece and component that you think you are. We'll slide it right up to the outside edge for now. Actually, I think what I'll do is I will push it back to the inside. And then we're going to do the same thing on the front. We've got another closure piece at the end of the building. We can't have crazy wildlife environment coming in. So we're going to grab this beam, and we'll make a copy of it. And just slide it over. And we're going to move it right like we did to the other one. We'll slide it and connect it to the inside edge of the column and line that one up. And again, we need to make sure that this one is unique, and it is unique, so we know it's not a functioning component. There aren't two like it. And we will come in and slide it back. Now, for some reason, we're going to double check this one when we're done and make sure we didn't shrink up our back column. And you know what? We sure enough did. Notice how our back beam shrunk up when we made that change? So we're going to undo that. That's why it wasn't unique. I managed to not move it, to not make a copy. I just simply moved it. So I'm going to go back in, fix that error, use my control key, make sure I hit it, and make sure this time I get a copy. And we'll go put that beam back in place. Thought it was weird that it didn't think it was a unique beam. So now if we select it, it should give us a make unique option, because there are two beams like that in the model now. So now it's unique, and we will open it up. And we can push it back. And now our building appears to have some nice little closure off the front. So now we've gone through the columns and we've got our beams established. I'm going to go ahead and go in and hit File, and we'll save our stahl structure in progress.